Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and I would like also to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to talk today. Yeah, Mike, you've set an excellent introduction to my talk. I'm now actually going to talk to you, give you a practical example and take you through this example. I realized that due to shortness of time, I should really concentrate on one of two examples, so I'm only going to talk about our recombinant TB vaccine. If you came only because of the CMV vaccine, please contact me afterwards. I'm happy to give you more information about that. Yeah, we already heard about the many challenges when you want really to take a product or a project from the bench to the clinics and further into the market. And many researchers shy away from that very complex task, and what results in is that finally we have a lot of missed opportunities and loss of lives because those interesting candidates do never see a patient and are never available for a patient. In our company, VPM, what we do, we work on our own projects. We are constantly looking for interesting candidates in academia, and we develop them. And we did that successfully for our own projects. 3 out of 5 were out-licensed to Big Pharma, and we stay involved in the project management. This is, among others, this tuberculosis vaccine, which I'm going to talk about today. And also you can come to us with your interesting projects, and a lot of academic groups do that, European initiatives, venture capital, and we work together with them to translate their projects. So this is how classical R&D planning looks like. It's quite complex, and you start from the beginning and then plan step by step from research and then hopefully finally into early market entry. You see how complex it is. There are so many steps involved where you can do wrong, and plan ahead is never so easy. So our approach is different, and we think it's faster in the end, and it is less risky than the other way. We plan with the objective in mind and use a reverse approach. So the first thing we do always is make up a target product profile. We define target market, target partner, and then think backwards. What do we have to do for phase 3, clinical phase 3? How does that have to look like so that you can really prove that your result matches the target product profile? And then go back one more step. How does a phase 2 have to look like to result in such a phase 3, and so on and so on. The other very, very important thing is that you involve regulators as early as possible. That's what they say as well, but we also do it, and it has always been very, very successful. So we involve them in our non-clinical, we involve them in the quality, and also in the clinical planning, and at the earliest possible time points. What we also do is define stage gates. So these are checkpoints where when we advance through the project, we check whether we are still within time and predefined results at these stage gates, and or whether we would have to adjust at a certain time point. So now I would like to show you that where we did this for our recombinant TB vaccine, call it VPM1002. That's a recombinant BCG. I don't want to talk too much about tuberculosis. You all know it's a huge problem. It's a worldwide problem, and we have no real good vaccines at the moment. BCG is around since a long time. It's an attenuated live vaccine. It is not very effective. It protects against severe childhood forms of TB, meningitis, but it is not at all effective for the most common form of pulmonary TB in adults. Also, it has safety issues called BCGosis. That's a systemic BCG infection. It occurs especially in immunosuppressed and, for example, in newborn infants who get the vaccine who were born to HIV-positive mothers because they have a less positive outcome from the immunology side. And the reasons are lying in the mechanism of action, which is shown here. This is a macrophage. And so the BCG is taken up by the macrophage and enters into the phagosome. Inside the phagosome, it does two things. The BCG has an enzyme called urease. Urease makes the pH in the phagosome more alkaline, which prevents then the fusion with the lysosome. So that is basically the mechanism how the BCG stays inside the phagosome and is not degraded. So antigens cannot very effectively be transported into the cytosol, and especially the immune response is not very efficient, especially you have low MHC1 presentation, for example. This is actually the idea for the recombinant BCG comes from the lab of Stefan Kaufmann in the Max Planck for Infection Biology in Berlin. They're working in the TB field for a long time, and they have developed this. In this recombinant BCG, the urease is functionally deleted by inclusion of a listeriolysin, and it has several effects. First of all, the urease cannot alkalinize the pH in the phagosome, so now it can fuse with the lysosome, and the BCG can be degraded, and the antigens can be generated. Also, the listeriolysin, which has been included, is a pore-forming enzyme. So it creates pores in the wall of the phagolysosome so that the antigens are much more efficient transported into the cytosol. And there they create a whole lot of different immune reaction than usually with the normal BCG. So now you have MHC1 presentation, a lot more efficient CD8 cell response due to that. Aside from the antigens, also cathepsins get into the cytosol, and these cause an apoptosis of the cell, and by that also we see cross-priming. We see that the free DNA from the mycobacteria enters the cytosol, is bound by sting, activates the inflammasome, and causes autophagy, and all kind of different things which you would never see with a normal BCG. So we end up with a much more promising immune response. Quickly, I would like to show you some features. One of the problems that I told you with the normal BCG is that it's no longer effective in adults, and the reason is poor memory. You see here that here we looked at CD4 T cells, T cell fractions, central memory cells, normal BCG with the recombinant BCG, and follicular helper cells, normal BCG, recombinant BCG. A lot more we see of both, and this certainly is good for the memory and more long-lasting response. Next point, challenge model. So this is the most important, which you always have to show that. Does it protect from TB? This is a mouse model, have been vaccinated once with either the recombinant or normal BCG, and then 120 days after they're challenged with a well-defined dose of a clinical isolate of TB. And then you look for the CFUs for the Mycobacterium tuberculosum in lungs, spleen, and so on. And what you see here is these are naive animals. They have a lot of the TB around in the lungs and in the spleen. And this is the blue curve is for the BCG. It's a little bit reduced, but it's a lot better for the recombinant BCG. And this is log scale, I have to say, on the y-axis. Safety. Safety is another issue. I told you about the BCG-osis. This is a safety model. SCID mice. SCID mice are severely immune-compromised mice. They don't have an adaptive immune response. When they get BCG, they die around 20 days. When you give them the recombinant BCG, they completely survive. Reason is this apoptosis mechanism. What happens is that the recombinant BCG takes away its own host by the apoptosis of the macrophage, and that causes the infection to be self-contained, which you also see when you look at PK. This is data showing the persistence in lymph nodes, spleen, lungs. Blue curve is again the BCG, and the red curve is the recombinant BCG. You don't at all see it in the lungs, but nonetheless, it's completely sufficient to mount an efficient immune response in the lungs as well, which is important. So now, where do we stand? We licensed that in 2004, and then started the development. In 2006, we had the first GMP material, and only 4 years it took us to have the first-in-man trial, which we did in Germany in healthy adults. Only 2 years afterwards, we did the first trial, in South Africa, also in healthy adults, but the difference is in South Africa, people are still exposed to TB every day. Nonetheless, these were TB negative. And in 2012, we had the first trial in the target population, which are neonates, newborn babies of healthy mothers at that time. Just 2 weeks ago, we started the next phase 2 trial, also in South Africa, also in neonates. And now we're looking at babies of HIV-infected mothers, so which have really a poor outcome. Normally with normal BCG, you see a lot more side effects of that. I have to mention that since 2013, we have out-licensed the project again to Serum Institute of India. They're not very well known, although they are the biggest manufacturer of vaccines worldwide in terms of number of doses. Every second child in the world is vaccinated with a dose of vaccine which comes from that company. And we stayed on board for doing the project management for them. And very important as well is the academic group from Stefan Kaufmann, from where it's originally originated, is also staying on board. This is absolutely critical because all the immunology data comes from them. And they have the expertise to do that really and to advance this. Sideline project, which is also interesting, is these days we're starting in a second trial, which is a second application for normal BCGs and bladder cancer. BCG is used for immunotherapy by bladder installation, and these days we're starting a multi-site trial in Switzerland foremost, and in Germany and in the Netherlands. So we're hoping to see good effects there as well. Yes, I would like to come to an end shortly, but what I want to say is that we have to look at the current situation with normal BCG. And what I have to mention is that there's currently a severe and ongoing shortage of normal BCG. So this is a UNICEF article published just recently in June, several days ago, where they said, we need 180 million doses of BCG this year. We have 107 million doses. And the manufacturers are not able to procure more right now. Excuse me. And the same is true in bladder cancer. Normal BCG, the biggest players are Merck, Sanofi, Medac. They all have published an announcement that they are no longer able to supply BCG for these applications. So doctors are basically now have to value, either they use chemotherapy instead because there's nothing available, or they have to take out the bladder of the patients, which is has severe effects on quality of life of the patients as well. And what's making even more severe the situation in Africa is this article came out also a couple of days ago from Doctors Without Borders, who were saying we have shortages not only in TB vaccine, but we also have shortages of TB medication and HIV medication, so which makes it worse from the other side. And this is also why you need to be fast with your projects and fast for translation, why it's so important. With that, I want to thank you for your attention. I would like to use the opportunity, if you want to know more about translational development from target to market, please attend our conference, which happens in September in Hannover. Thank you.
So this shortage in vaccines, what are the main reasons for that from your view?
The manufacture of BCG is not very easy. It takes a long time. It takes a month of fermentation, pre-culture steps, fermentation steps, freeze drying, and apparently it's so complex that, for example, Sanofi had a problem in their facilities which they couldn't remedy, so they had to take down their whole facility and rebuild it, for example. And if there are only 3 players around, and one is taken out completely, then the others cannot supply anymore. And also you have the problem that not every BCG has market authorization in each country, and then the supply situation aggravates from that side, and the others cannot just compensate, because these fermenters have limited capabilities of liter-wise and so on, and then it takes a long time, and that's main problem why we have this problem.